Thank you, Dr. McGarry. Distinguished faculty, graduates, family members, and friends. Let me preface my remarks by telling you that what I'm trying to accomplish today in this address. I've had the good fortune and the opportunity in my career to have grown 3 companies that ostensibly were bankrupt when I took them over. And we were able to turn them around into health. All 3 were real dogs in the parent company's portfolio. 2 of them, in the restaurant business, became flagship companies for that same parent company and ultimately went public. The 3rd one, Color Me Mine, as you heard Dr. McGarry say, is now in 9 countries and 27 states. I had to really identify what it was, and if you'll forgive my fast food lingo, what was the secret sauce that made these companies turn around? What was that competitive edge or that intangible edge? And the idea is that I want you to be able to find your edge when you go out on that interview, when you seek internships, and when you start making decisions about your career. And I want you to know the alumni, we're all here to help you. We'll all take your calls, we'll all mentor, we'll all help. You're such wonderful people. It's just such an inspiration when I work with you, and I'm so inspired. You make us hopeful, and I just congratulate you all. And along that line, I discovered an article about a man named Buckminster Fuller. He's a famed architect and engineer. You may not have heard of him. But in so many ways, his life articulated that intangible edge. His invention, the geodesic dome, was featured at the Montreal World's Fair in 1967. It later resulted in Biosphere 2, the geodesic Earth Systems research facility in Arizona. And, you might add, with the World Cup going on, he designed the modern-day soccer ball. The year was 1927, and Mr. Fuller was 32 years old. Now that's young by today's standards, but then the average life expectancy of a male was 42 years. He would go frequently running along the shoreline of Lake Michigan. And you know, he knew that shoreline, every inch of it. He knew it well. He knew exactly the spot to stop, jump in, and end his life. You see, 4 years earlier, he lost his 5-year-old daughter to some infant-related illnesses. He worked hard. He managed his father-in-law's manufacturing business, but he drank all night to cope with his depression. He finally got to a point where he thought it would be the right place to jump, and he hesitated. And a revelation came to him, a thought came to him that went like this: you don't have the right to eliminate yourself. Now, you know, he thought he had to get himself out of the way, because at that point he had a new baby girl born to him and his wife. And with only 10 years left, he figured he'd remove himself from the situation and let his wife and baby have a free life on their own to start over. So, again, that thought, you don't have the right to eliminate yourself, came to him. And then he paused, and he answered that thought. He said, but what can I, a penniless little human being, possibly do to contribute something to humanity that political states and large corporations cannot do? And again, a thought came to him. And that thought is really the theme of this talk. It said this: the individual can take initiatives without anyone's permission. You are fulfilling your significance if you apply yourself to the highest advantage of others. By the way, he lived to be 88 years old. And as an aside, that new baby girl I referred to has a UCLA connection. Allegra Fuller Snyder is UCLA's Professor Emerita of Dance Ethnology. Imagine what a loss it would have been had he made that jump into Lake Michigan rather than listening to the revelation that his significance in life would be measured by how he was applying himself to the highest advantage of others. So now let's consider your significance in applying yourself to the highest advantage of others. How important it is to listen to the inspiration that comes to you and then take the initiative to act on that inspiration. You know, I've heard the old adage, virtue is its own reward. But I've also heard it reversed to criticize the economist who thinks that reward is its own virtue. Let's debunk that. Do you want to make money or do you want to make sense? Haven't you ever wondered why economics is in the School of Social Sciences? It's actually the ultimate social science. You see, the word economy comes from two Greek words meaning house and steward. And in its true sense, it means the administration of the concerns and resources of a community. And you've all heard the word synergy. We've used that often. Well, Fuller was the father of the theory of synergistics, which examines an isolated component, including you and I, and the effect that it has on the whole system. So how can you, as just one individual, as one isolated component of the whole, have a meaningful role in administering the resources and concerns of your communities? You know, it's only fear that holds you back from being your better self and from sharing your inspiration with others. And it's the knowledge that fear can sometimes be extreme, even more extreme than Econ 41 statistics, or that dreaded Econ 11, or Dr. McDivitt's 12 optional questions on a multiple choice test on the final. Where is it? But what I'm talking about is more serious. When you're working for a company, as I did, that out of total greed managed their stock price rather than their business, will you have the courage to stand up for what's right, for the mission of the company, the good of the employees? What about when you have a great idea in your company, but the politics and the corporate culture is such that you'll be criticized, ridiculed, and the whole idea will be resisted? Will you be intimidated from presenting your idea? You know, many of you will be interviewing this summer. Are you going to resort to telling the interviewer what you think they want to hear, what everyone else is saying, the canned talk? They don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear what they've heard before. They want to know about your significance, your uniqueness. They want to witness your inspiration, initiative, and out of generosity, a desire to make a real difference. So let's look at those three qualities: inspiration, initiative, and generosity. And let's look at them as economic laws. Although they're not discussed in textbooks, they're directly related to the stewardship of the resources of the community, true economics, true social science. So first, the law of inspiration. Wealth is not money coming to you. It's ideas appearing through you. I'm going to repeat that. Wealth is not money coming to you. It's your grand ideas appearing through you. Listen to those ideas. Opportunities are hiding in plain sight, but what blocks the view? Well, it's discouragement, self-will, and ego. Seeing some roadblock in the pathway, we can either shrink from the challenge or rise to the occasion. Either we see a problem in front of us or a waiting opportunity. Always fight that temptation to become discouraged. The second obstacle to inspiration is self-will. Forcing our own predetermined outcome not only stifles fresh thinking, but more importantly, solutions which would otherwise be considered will remain hidden. The third is ego. We can't be receptive to new ideas by thinking we already know all the answers or outlining what we think should happen. So resisting discouragement, eliminating self-will, and parking our egos at the side of the road will reveal previously unseen opportunities, and they'll open thought to fresh inspiration. Our second law is the law of initiative. According to Buckminster Fuller, you don't need anyone's permission to take initiative. You're probably familiar with the quote by Wayne Gretzky when he said, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take." Along that same line, when Dean Durante, who's on a plane to Italy right now, finished his PhD, he was apprehensive about applying for a particular position. A friend told him, "If you want to be sure not to get that job, don't apply." What would prevent us from taking the initiative needed to fully act on our inspiration? We overcome fear when we leverage our innate curiosity and sense of discovery. Then we're open to new ideas and fresh approaches. Dr. McGarry mentioned a story about me in the introduction, and I'll give you a little of the backstory. My last year here at UCLA, Nancy and I were newlyweds. By the way, our anniversary is tomorrow, 46 years. Happy anniversary, darling. We lived in married student housing over on Sawtell. I was running a McDonald's at night and going to school during the day. One of my duties was to write the work schedule for some 60 employees. And you can imagine 60 teenagers all wanting Saturday night off and this exchange for that person's shift and so forth. It was a real mathematical puzzle to try to satisfy everyone's request and come in on budget. I'd get home from work around midnight and then show up for 3 days a week for a 7 a.m. calculus class. I remember waking up one morning in the middle of the professor's lecture while he was explaining a particular function and its application to writing work schedules. Writing work schedules? I was wide awake. He continued that it was the same formula that Henry Ford used for scheduling workers to manufacture automobiles on the assembly line. I made a beeline for his office after class. I told him all about the 60 hours, 60 employees and the 4 or 5 hours and yada, yada, yada. And I said, "You got to show me that schedule." And he said, "You know, Mooslin, if you didn't sleep during class, you'd already know the answer." And then he showed me what was done. And I took the initiative, I went back to my job, and I tried it. And the result was that 5 hours turned into less than 20 minutes, and I had a mathematically perfect work schedule. I had more people on the floor when I needed them, less on the floor when I didn't. And I lowered the labor costs significantly. Well, the supervisors came in, wanted to know what I did. I had too many people on the floor for the small amount of money I was spending. I sheepishly pulled out my papers that my professor had done with me, showed me. And that calculus professor became the source of the nationwide scheduling protocol at McDonald's. And it's a standard now in the fast food industry, as you heard, and is simply called bar chart scheduling. I was well rewarded. I moved from $2.70 an hour to $2.85 an hour. Big money. The point is, though, is that we never can predict the result of taking initiative. Here's a seemingly small act that resulted in a significant return for a major corporation. Who knew? So we have inspiration and initiative. Now let's look at the law number 3, the law of generosity. The late Maya Angelou said, "When you get, give. When you learn, teach." Now that's my sense of supply-side economics. The more you give of your ideas, of yourself, the more you give, the more you have to give. It's an ongoing cycle allowing you to continually express your gifts and talents. Seek out those opportunities to contribute to the greater good. And I'm not just referring to charitable works. Applying yourself to the highest advantage of others means that if you want to be successful, make your employees successful first. Use the marketplace to provide goods and services that improves people's lives. Without this generous spirit, your life purpose is diminished. So instead of being a go-getter, I want you all to go out and be go-givers. Remember Maya Angelou's statement, when you get, give. And when you learn, teach. Along that line, I thought you might like to hear a little of the background on how that law came about regarding the change for the developmentally disabled. It was in the early 80s, and I was a young president of a growing restaurant chain employing about 12,000 employees. I looked for new ways to meet part-time staffing needs, and I looked to the developmentally disabled community as a source of manpower. And this was before Walmart or any of the others were doing it. And I was encouraged by the incentive of federal job tax credits. And I named my program Hire and Hire, H-I-R-E and H-I-G-H-E-R. And I saw an opportunity for employees, for the company, and for the government to all benefit. I successfully hired a number of individuals, disabled individuals, only to learn that upon earning more than $280 a month, the amount below which they remain eligible for Medicaid payments, they were dropped from the system, lost thousands of dollars, and had to resign. Now, I had already built a fast food restaurant inside of a sheltered workshop to train these special needs people. And I got my competitors to agree to hire all the graduates. But how could this be? How could the government pay me on one hand and then turn around and take away the benefits and force these people to quit on the other? It just didn't seem right. And it seemed really easy that if we just raised the threshold from $280 to something higher, that we could turn welfare recipients into taxpayers and provide mainstream employment to individuals heretofore relegated to sheltered workshops, and all without increasing governmental costs. But I was just one person. Heard that before? What could I do? What could I possibly do that would have an effect on the whole system? I appealed to our congressman, who understood the contradiction. He encouraged me to talk to our senator. And quickly, the project was growing out of hand. It was much bigger than me. It came to me, though, nonetheless, to fly to Washington, D.C., and without any appointments, to knock on as many doors as I could of lawmakers and try to get them to listen. And this was against the advice of many who assumed the task was absolutely impossible. With the help of the Department of Health and Human Services, I was introduced to congressional staffers who specialized in this area of the law. They were both encouraged and incredulous that a lone employer with no political ties showed an interest in their work and was willing to get to the bottom of the problem. Now, the story is too long to tell in detail, but in the end, a single congressman agreed to sponsor a demonstration project to raise the earnings threshold to over $700 a month. It got the needed votes in Congress and allowed several 100,000 people to join the ranks of the employed and taken off the welfare rolls. About 10 or 12 years later, I was driving down the street and I was listening to the car radio. And I heard the announcement that our little demonstration project that had been renewed 4 or 5 times was now made permanent law. You can imagine. So in closing, let's review your secret sauce recipe. You don't have the right to deprive the rest of us of your talents. And you don't need permission to take initiative. It's your time. And it's your turn. You're more than graduates. You're more than young people going out to embark on great careers. You're the future we've invested in. This institution, your families, and each of you deserve a return on that investment. So listen for inspiration, display the needed initiative to act on that inspiration, and do so with a generous heart, applying your talent to the highest advantage of others. Congratulations, graduate, and go Bruins!